there was this little thing called e-commerce. And what they did was they allowed Amazon to run that business for them when it was just a little thing. And you have to be very careful about the little things that you outsource that may someday become big things.
Unbelievable.
And man, they taught Amazon, they brought Amazon into the business. They made their biggest competitors. In Toys R Us case, they really created their own downfall.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Lomitech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we're going to be talking about the Amazon Way with John Rossman, author of The Amazon Way and managing partner of Rossman Partners. John is the author of the Amazon Way book series, a former Amazon leader and managing partner at Rossman Partners. John is an expert leveraging the Amazon leadership principles to help others innovate, compete, and win in the digital era. John was an executive at Amazon.com, where he played a key role in launching the Amazon Marketplace business as the director of merchant integration, and went on to have responsibilities for the enterprise business at Amazon. Welcome, John. John Rossman, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
Michael, thanks for having me. I'm great, doing great.
Well, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be here. I'm really excited to hone in on your journey as an innovator and a critical thinker on an enterprise level, on a global level. Previously an executive and director within Amazon, dealing with some incredible enterprise clients like Target and Sears. And now you're also an innovative, coach or advisor to a variety of companies. You wrote a book called The Amazon Way, talking about some principles in leadership from Amazon. And I'm really excited to hear about that as well. John, walk me through, before we get into those principles, walk me a little bit through your career and how you end up as an innovator thinker.
Yeah, so I studied engineering in school. I was always interested in solving problems, and in particular, like integration. How do you integrate systems, data, processes, cultures, organizations, business models? I kept going up the stack from an integration standpoint. I was at a small technology company early in 2000, and a former colleague of mine from Amazon said, "Hey, you got to come over and talk to us about an initiative we're thinking about." So after several interviews, I got the opportunity in early 2002 to go to Amazon, help lead the marketplace launch in 2002. So today that business is over 50% of all units shipped and sold at Amazon. So we launched the marketplace in late 2002. I ran that for a couple of years, and then I went to run enterprise services at Amazon. So we ran Target.com, Amazon, Toys R Us, a bunch of other great brands. And I left Amazon in late 2005.
I have to just stop you, John, and just share with you that recently in one of my Stanford classes, we actually did a case study, and we were studying, how Amazon was working with Target on building the marketplace. And I think so now I'm matching the face with the event.
I'd love to see those materials and see kind of the factual, what fact versus fiction aspects of that. That was a complex relationship, and but I think it's the lesson behind that from both Target and Toys R Us is there was this little thing called e-commerce, and what they did was they allowed Amazon to run that business for them when it was just a little thing. And you have to be very careful about the little things that you outsource that may someday become big things.
Unbelievable.
And man, they taught Amazon, they brought Amazon into the business. They made their biggest competitors. In Toys R Us case, they really created their own downfall through that relationship. And so it's a interesting story of being careful about the future and things that may seem really small, but are actually the future of the business.
Back then, did you personally have an idea, of what's happening here? Because obviously today we can look back and we're thinking, how the hell did they do that? But back then, what was that like?
Well, to some degree, yes, because all you had to do was do the math, right? So e-commerce at that point was growing at 10 to 20% a year, but it was only 1 to 2% of the business. But general retail was only growing 1 to 2% of the year. So you just had to do the math and you go, I don't know how long, but this is going to be a big business. And the other thing, like we intrinsically knew, was it's a better customer experience. It's a complementary customer experience. And over time, it's going to get better. The infrastructure is going to get better. The browsing experience is going to get better. Mobility wasn't even a thing at that point. And so we absolutely knew that we were the fox in the hen house, right? Like we got invited in to run this business, but we really couldn't believe that they had allowed that to happen.
Right. And so just for the context, which is definitely important back then, Target and I learned also Toys R Us actually contracted Amazon to run their e-commerce business.
So here's how ridiculous it was. If back in 2000, 2001, if you went to toysrus.com, you actually went to a branded Amazon website page. So they
Wow.
gave the whole customer experience away. And that's how short-sighted that relationship was.
Wow. Well, it's going to go down in history as one of those bigger plays that we all need to learn about. And now I understand also your fascination with innovation, because this is a part of the story of innovation, right?
It really is. And I think, Amazon is, I believe, the most interesting company in the digital era. And they're the most interesting company in the digital era for a few reasons. First is they have created the most complex but really well integrated sets of different business models, right? They have the retail business, the marketplace, slightly different than the retail business. They have a private labels business. They have AWS, they have Kindle, they have their content business, multiple content businesses. But they actually are highly integrated together, both from a customer experience standpoint, as well as from an operating leverage standpoint. And Amazon is both a world-class operator and a systematic innovator. And it's understanding that those are two different playbooks. Most people go, oh, I'm a good operator, I can be a good innovator. It's like the very things you do as a good operator typically squash being an innovator. And so most of the work I do is with medium to large companies. And how do you complement the great business, the great operating skills you have with an actual thoughtful growth agenda and an innovation process to be a systematic innovator? And so looking at Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 beyond your Horizon 1 business models, that's the work I do. And it's fascinating to see when the light bulbs start going on of like what we need to do. One of the things that takes, though, is that you have to be willing to not optimize for today's profitability for this quarter. And that, again, something Amazon has demonstrated time and time again. They are more than willing to sacrifice this quarter's profits, this year's profits, to invest and create tomorrow's businesses. And that's, again, another reason why I think they are the most interesting company in the digital era. And then the last reason I think they're the interesting company in the digital era is they're so crystal clear about how they do things internally. And so it's the what they're doing is interesting to me, but it's the why and the how they do it that is the real story. They operate with the same mechanisms, the same principles now that they did when I was there. And so that consistency of how they work has allowed them to become a massive company without becoming a bureaucracy, without slowing down. And that is the story that I captured in the Amazon way is what's the unlock? How do we take some of these principles and some of these mechanisms and insert them into our business?
Incredible. And so as you're sitting today, with one of your small and medium businesses, and you're thinking through these principles, what are some trends that are coming up that I, as a young entrepreneur, can take with me on my journey as I'm thinking about operations, innovation, everything in between, from your experience?
Well, two consistent patterns. It varies situation, but two consistent patterns. First is gaining clarity of thought on what we're proposing to do. At most organizations, they develop a PowerPoint, they have a general notion of what they're going to do, but they're actually talking past each other on a number of important points. It could be the value proposition. It could be how we are going to test and evaluate something. It's really the clarity of what we are proposing to do. Amazon has some great mechanisms, things they do to help get that type of clarity. And it really starts with the writing skills, right? Writing narratives, writing future press releases, writing frequently asked questions before you commit to an endeavor so that we think through it so much better, and that the teams that are working this and the decision makers actually have a simple and clear and consistent understanding of this is what we envision doing and how we do it. And then the second pattern that comes up is really in establishing our goals relative to, either this initiative or our business in general. The 14th leadership principle at Amazon is deliver results. And what they talk about is that we focus on controllable inputs to achieve the outputs that we want. Most organizations spend most of their time talking about the outputs, financial outputs, market share outputs, other types of gains. What they don't focus on, what they don't get clarity on, is the controllable inputs. What are we going to do in order to get to those outputs? And so there's a lot of tools that you can do. OKRs, objectives, key results, is one framework that can be really helpful. But most teams aren't willing to have the debate and spend the time in really carefully dissecting, this is how I think I am going to achieve the output that I want. And so just slowing them down and forcing them to really have debatable moments of how we are going to achieve an output. Again, it's about clarity of thought before we enter the initiative, I think, is one of Amazon's real superpowers, and something that I work with a lot of my clients on.
So how does one, from your experience, keep themselves in check as they're, asking, am I being innovative? Am I fostering a culture where I'm able to have these intellectual debates, whether I'm able to foster a culture where people can gain clarity and be very intentional about what they do? It sounds like that is something that Amazon has achieved, but how can leaders keep themselves in check with that?
Yeah, I think one thing to do is really just have a portfolio understanding of your initiatives, the things you are doing. And if you think about a portfolio that measures on one axis potential benefit, on the other axis potential risk, and what most companies are good at is that lower left-hand quadrant, low risk, low reward. Essentially, these are the things we understand really well. And if we execute well, we know what sort of return we should get on it. What most companies aren't good at, and they gloss over, is that upper right-hand quadrant, high risk, high reward. That's where you have to have a different playbook. But most companies don't even understand that there is a portfolio relative to your initiative. You have to recognize those upper right-hand quadrant moments. Those are bets. We think it's a good idea, but we don't know for sure. So the key thing you have to do is you have to test it, right? That's the whole minimally viable product, agile mindset. But especially in bigger companies, like their whole institution is built around how to make things that should be small and testable into really big, monolithic, requirements-laden, process-laden moments and projects. And so that's where we need a different playbook in order to make those really testable moments. So keep yourself in check by having a portfolio view of the initiatives that you're doing.
Amazing. So the Amazon Way, you recently launched the book. what are some other interesting case studies that you're examining from, Amazon as a company that, I as a young entrepreneur can look back and say, wow, this is something really cool. And it's not really trivial to know that this is how they did it.
Well, a couple of the things so this is actually the third edition of the book, pretty significant revision. Tom Alberg, who was on the board at Amazon for 23 years.
Wow.
He's the founder of Madrona Venture Capital, wrote the foreword for the book. So that alone is a worthwhile short read, but he really talks about like these principles are real to Amazon, and he's seen where they can be real to others. I wrote a preface for the book, and I really took it as a strategy exercise. If I were to make one recommendation to Amazon, what would the recommendation be? You have to understand where Amazon comes from. The past 25 years, they came from a scrappy, doubted entrepreneurial organization, and they still have some of that scrappiness in them.
Interesting.
They've won the game, right? Like just concede the game to them. I think they need to think about a new leadership principle that prioritizes other stakeholders, other than customers, other than shareholders, stakeholders like brands, like employees, like the communities that they live in. And change at Amazon starts with the leadership principle. So it's not a criticism, it's a strategic perspective for them, because they do have things to address. In Bezos' last shareholder letter, he's pretty clear about one of them, which is, we need to do a better job at the employee experience and employee safety. And he stated a mission for that. So they have some things to address, but they also, there's a narrative out there about big tech, and they are in general losing that narrative. And so I think the jujitsu move would be if you restated a leadership principle that said, we are going to be better than the best relative to being a stakeholder in the community at whole. I think that would help reset the narrative both internally and externally. And then I wrote a new appendix in the book. I've worked with so many companies on building their leadership principles. And so I wrote an appendix about building your own leadership principles. Again, what most companies want to do is they want to rush through it, right? Like, okay, let's have a retreat. We declare our leadership principles, and then they're off with it. You have to take time with these things. I talk about in the book, you have to etch them in Jello, right? Create a draft, live with them, see how you really practice them, and then be willing to come back to it and revisit. Principles are about culture, and culture is about the little things you do every day that create patterns and create outcomes in a company. And that's what these leadership principles do for Amazon. So the key for anybody who wants to have a consistent culture of how we debate things, how we hold each other accountable, how we make decisions, is you have to think about a practical set of tenets or principles or rules, whatever you want to call them, but then you got to practice them. You're not going to get it right the first time. And it takes time for these patterns, these tools to be replicated across your organization.
Amazing. John, thank you so much for coming and for sharing your insights. And this really is closing a circle for me from that Stanford class. I really appreciate it. But I have a few more questions, not about Amazon, but about you. And I want to take you back to your childhood. And I want to know what really fascinated you as a kid.
Well, I would say the things that had the biggest impact on me as a kid and fascinated me was I loved team sports. I loved the nature of having a common goal and a group of people that, although you knew that that you had different roles, and different skills, you were there to achieve a goal. And I loved the practice, like the hard work you had to do in order to achieve a goal. And coaches, my athletic coaches were really some of the biggest influencers in my life. And so that was really the things I prized from my childhood were typically about the teams that I got to be part of.
Amazing. And inspiration today, what inspires you on a daily basis?
Well, what inspires me, I like being a practical strategist and problem solver still, right? Like I love not being the expert in the business, that separation, the fresh set of eyes is 90% of the time a real asset for me. I'm working with a team, I'm working with a client. They have the expertise, but I have a fresh set of eyes. I can ask different questions, I can challenge assumptions, and I can step back and see things. And I love when we work together and we come up with a new observation relative to the business, how we work together, how they achieve. And so I am so fortunate to get to do the type of work that I get to do today, and those are the best moments when together you really have an unlock, an insight that they didn't have before.
Amazing. And what are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself?
I'm pretty energetic. I have a tough time sitting still, so I like having variety in my activities and in the work I do. I'm a strategist, and I always try to approach things not just from a short-term basis, but from a long-term basis. And how do you create multiples of wins and not just a one-off win? And I think I'm a clarifier, right? We talked about kind of gaining clarity, and a couple of my long-term partners they've always commented to me like, John, what you're always doing with a group is you're working to simplify and clarify what they're doing, what they're working on, what they're saying. And I think it's because I'm honestly struggling most of the time to like understand it myself. I just have to force them to say it in a simpler, more consistent, clear way so that I actually understand it. So I always say, like, I'm the idiot test here, right? And we're not done until I truly get it. But again, that's the combination that helps make it effective.
John, thank you so much. Really, really interesting insights, and I really appreciate you coming here. And thank you for the inspiration, and continue making a positive impact with a lot of the companies you're working on. And I'm looking forward to reaching out for advice with my own company that I'll start on how to build a culture of innovation and be very deliberate and intentional about that. So thank you very much.
Well, best of luck to you and your endeavors, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.